Deep within the untamed heart of the Alaskan wilderness, a place untouched by civilization, lay a silence so profound it was almost deafening. Towering pines stood sentinel, their branches heavy with the weight of centuries. The air hung thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. An oppressive sense of isolation permeated everything. This was a place of raw, untamed beauty, where nature reigned supreme and man was merely a visitor. But beneath the breathtaking vistas and serene landscapes lurked an undeniable sense of foreboding. The wilderness held its secrets close, guarded by the whispering wind and the watchful eyes of unseen creatures. It was a place where the laws of man meant nothing, and the laws of nature were absolute. A place where even the bravest souls could be swallowed whole, leaving behind only whispers and legends. The silence of the wilderness was shattered by a sound that sent shivers down the spine. A low, guttural howl, primal and filled with an unspeakable rage, echoed through the trees. It was a sound that spoke of a creature far larger and more powerful than any wolf or bear. The howl seemed to emanate from the very depths of the forest, from a place where the sun dared not penetrate. It hung in the air, heavy and oppressive, long after the last vibrations had faded. The forest held its breath, every creature within earshot frozen in place, united in fear. This was not a sound of territoriality or hunger. This was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, a sound that spoke of something ancient and malevolent stirring in the darkness. It was a sound that whispered of nightmares made flesh, of a darkness that consumed all light and hope. A group of hikers, oblivious to the lurking shadows, ventured deeper into the wilderness. They were drawn by the allure of the unknown, by the promise of adventure and the challenge of conquering nature's obstacles. Their laughter and conversation seemed to bounce off the silent trees, a jarring contrast to the oppressive atmosphere. They were young and full of life, their backpacks laden with supplies and their hearts filled with the naive confidence of those who had never truly faced the unforgiving wilderness. They spoke of reaching the peak by nightfall, their voices echoing through the silent woods. They were woefully unprepared for what awaited them in the heart of the wilderness, for the ancient evil that stirred beneath the surface. They were like lambs wandering into a den of wolves, their ignorance their only shield against the horrors that lurked in the shadows. As the hikers pressed onward, the forest seemed to close in around them. The air grew colder, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the dense canopy overhead. The once vibrant colors of the wilderness seemed to fade, replaced by muted shades of gray and brown. A strange unease settled over the group, a feeling that they were being watched by unseen eyes. Whispers seemed to dance on the wind, carrying fragments of their conversation and distorting them into something sinister. The laughter died down, replaced by a tense silence broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their boots. The wilderness was toying with them, revealing its true nature, slowly, methodically stripping away their confidence and replacing it with a creeping dread that settled deep in their bones. They were no longer conquerors, but prey, caught in a web of fear they could not see or understand. The guttural howl came again, closer this time, shattering the uneasy truce that had settled over the forest. It was followed by a deafening silence, a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. The hikers froze, their blood turning to ice in their veins. The sound had been close, too close for comfort. The wilderness held its breath, every creature within its domain listening intently. The hikers were no longer visitors, they were intruders, and the wilderness was about to remind them of their place. The silence stretched on, an eternity contained within a few heartbeats. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that screamed of danger lurking just beyond the veil of perception. It was a silence that whispered of unseen horrors, of ancient evils lying in wait. Then, just as suddenly as it had descended, the silence was broken. But it wasn't the guttural howl that returned. This time it was a different sound altogether, a sound that sent a chill down their spines, a sound that spoke of a different kind of fear. It was a low, rhythmic thumping like the beating of a gigantic heart. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, vibrating through the very air they breathed. It was a primal sound, ancient and filled with a power that defied comprehension. The sound was unsettling, unnerving, in a way that the howl had not been. It spoke of something vast and unknowable, something that existed beyond the realm of human understanding. It was a sound that whispered of forgotten gods and ancient beings, of a power that could crush them like insects. As the rhythmic thumping grew louder, the hikers noticed something else. Shadows seemed to be moving at the edge of their vision, flitting between the trees with unnatural speed. They were too quick to be animals, too fluid to be human. The hikers exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale in the fading light. The wilderness was closing in around them, the shadows pressing closer with each passing moment. Whatever was out there with them was toying with them, herding them like sheep towards an unknown fate. Fear, raw and primal, took hold of the hikers. They were no longer in control, their carefully laid plans forgotten in the face of the unknown. They were at the mercy of the wilderness now, their lives hanging by a thread as the shadows closed in. One of the hikers, his nerves frayed beyond the breaking point, panicked. He broke from the group, running blindly through the trees, desperate to escape the unseen horrors that surrounded them. His screams echoed through the silent forest, a siren song of terror that only served to hasten their doom. The rhythmic thumping reached a fever pitch, the very air vibrating with its power. The shadows converged on the spot where the hiker had disappeared, their forms twisting and contorting in the fading light. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. An eerie silence descended once more, broken only by the sound of the hikers' ragged breathing. They knew with a certainty that chilled them to the bone that their friend was gone, claimed by the darkness that surrounded them. And they knew, with a growing sense of dread, that they were next. As darkness enveloped the forest, the hikers stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated cabin, its windows dark and lifeless. It was a beacon of hope in a sea of despair, a promise of shelter from the horrors that lurked in the shadows. With renewed determination, they surged forward, their fear momentarily forgotten in the face of their desperation. They pounded on the door, their voices hoarse with terror, begging for sanctuary. But the cabin remained silent, its dark windows reflecting their own terror back at them. It was a cruel trick, a glimmer of hope extinguished before it could even flicker to life. The wilderness was playing with them, toying with their emotions before delivering the final fatal blow. Their sanctuary was a tomb, a silent testament to the fate that awaited them all. As the realization of their predicament dawned on them, the rhythmic thumping began anew, closer now, accompanied by the guttural howl that seemed to split the very heavens. The shadows returned, swirling around the cabin, their forms growing larger, more defined. The hikers huddled together, their faces pale with terror, as the horrors of the wilderness closed in for the kill. They had glimpsed the true face of nature, the raw, uncaring power that lay beneath its beauty, and they knew with a certainty that transcended words that they would never escape its clutches. The sounds of their screams were swallowed by the wilderness, their cries for help lost in the cacophony of the night. The darkness closed in, consuming them whole, leaving behind only the echo of their terror and the unspoken truth. In the wilderness, some things are best left undisturbed.